ሰላም ጤና ይስጥልኝ Bethlehem Bekele here with KinetBet. Today we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition, and obviously we all know and we all love to eat food. I know I do. But we're going to talk about how important is that, what we choose, how it's impacting us, and we've brought very important and very knowledgeable people onto the show. We have Hirat Haile, Miraf Barnes, and Heran Abi. I'm going to bring them on right now, and then I'm going to introduce you guys one by one. Or better yet, I think the audience will probably like to hear their introduction with their own words. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Hi.
Hi.
So I started the introduction. I know this is not what we talked about, but since we started the introduction with Mirat, they're looking at me like, wait, what? But I'm getting feedback that it's probably best I get the introduction from you guys, just so that I don't want to cut out some of your bio. So Mirat, we can start from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I will start. I'm Mirat Haile actually, and I am currently speaking to you guys from Germany, so kind of on the other side of the world. I'm a food and nutrition scientist. I studied food and nutrition here. It's actually a complicated word, so I'm going to leave that out today. Ecotrophos is the actual word of it. Is a mix of nutrition and food and science, but also marketing, communication. So it kind of also took me to communication. I still work as a food journalist for some TV station or cooking shows, but I also worked from 2016 till last year in Ethiopia for a nutrition food program, which I was also responsible for communication. It was a food security program, but I was actually more responsible for behavior change communication. So I was creating there some nutrition tools like a cookbook or cards for children. And yeah, I think I'm just talking too much now. So that's me. Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. And you also didn't mention about your book. You also are an author. You forgot about that part, but we'll come back to that at the end.
Yeah. I can talk.
Okay. Yes, you did do that. You want to tell them the title of the book before we go to our next guest?
I wrote 3 books, and one two were for German fitness programs, but the one I'm really proud of is this one. This is the Journey of Nutrition, which I did in Ethiopia. So it was really like a dream came true. I didn't get to finish more books. I was actually going to write a little bit more based on the regions, but it didn't. I mean, Corona happened. So I hope, it's just postponed. So
we had to go on pause. We had to go on pause because of Corona.
Yeah, I'm pausing, but I'm also like taking it. I mean, it's also like a chance to work on more stuff and to explore more and plan ahead better. I mean, it might be different. Who knows how it's gonna end up? But it's just on hold, not
It's not now, but not never. It's going to continue, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for coming to the show, Mirat. The next one is Miraf Barnes, who is a registered dietitian, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm Miraf. I'm actually currently in Los Angeles, California. I'm a registered dietitian, so I work in a clinical facility. So we do have patients, but there's also assisted living. So some people need more help than others.
Okay.
I've also worked in community nutrition, so with young kids from like 0 to 5 years old. Also work with the USDA Food and Nutrition Services. So kind of got my hands in a lot of places, but I'm happy to be here, happy to have this discussion to address the cultural aspect of nutrition intervention. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. And last but not least, Heron Abi, welcome to the show. And tell us a little bit about you.
Hi.
Hi.
So you said my name is Heron. I recently graduated from medical school, and I also have a degree in nutritional science. And I've worked as kind of like a nutritional advisor in a lot of different research capacities, from Alzheimer's to prostate cancer to just kind of like advising people that kind of live in more underserved communities. Now kind of moving towards the medical field, it seems like it would be intuitive for doctors to know a lot about nutrition, but it's not something that doctors are taught at all.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not something doctors are taught at all. So I'm kind of like one of the few people that I guess would be in the room that does have, you know, an awareness of what nutritional sciences are when it comes to advising people as far as just kind of making lifestyle changes and going through with, you know, just diabetes, hypertension, those kind of things. Doctors are usually kind of given the tools as far as how to treat you medically with medication and things of that nature. But I have the kind of like best of both worlds, where I can tell you the kind of lifestyle changes that you really need to be making, down to the eating habits and the activity habits and things of that nature. So yeah, excited to be
Sort
here.
of like a holistic approach things. To know. Thank you so much for coming. So when I first started kind of developing the idea of what do we want to have the conversation about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I wanted to have this conversation. We're obviously all in a lockdown. I know we have Europe is covered, we have the West Coast, and we're here on the East Coast. We're on lockdown through and through. I've been in the house for 3 weeks. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But it is a necessary evil in order for us to make sure that we're staying healthy. So what I know that the impact of what I eat, how it impacts my body. And I know that it also adds to mentally how well we're going to do or not going to do based on what we talk about, what we're eating. But when we're tying all of that to the cultural aspect of things, I just wanted us to have a better idea and a better understanding of how those things impact us. So thank you so much for kind of bringing this to reality for me. I know a lot of people that I've talked to are wondering, what should we eat? I don't know what I'm going to cook. We haven't been able to eat out. I don't know this and I don't know that. And I know a lot of our mothers are going into their freezers and taking out some food that came from back home. So I just wanted to kind of have a conversation about all of those things being tied together. And I think from your all three expertise, I know we're going to be able to do that today. So thank you again for coming to the show. So the first question I wanted to ask is the food environment of the average Ethiopian home. What is that? Let's start with that, right? I know as an Ethiopian, and I know some Eritrean friends of mine, that we have traditions that are very strong, and a lot of our eating habits, our tradition or our culture is really tied with the food we eat. What does, and you guys are all know or have been exposed with what we're eating. How good or bad is that what we're eating? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Can we talk a little bit about that based on your tradition, our traditions, and what you guys have learned? And I guess, Heran, if you can start us off with that.
Yeah, sure. So our culture is very diverse in the kind of foods that we eat, but it's kind of really influenced by religion, and the kind of things that come with that would be like fasting. And so intermittent fasting is not something that we're brand new to. Being vegans is not something we're new to, but eating vegetables intentionally outside of when we're fasting is a problem. So, when we're not fasting, you can go days in an Abasha household before you see a vegetable. And
right.
You aren't, like if you don't have the kind of foundational like lessons there that teach you should probably have a fruit, you should probably have a vegetable. You
Balance,
should
right.
probably incorporate that.
Right.
Meat is not the only thing on your plate. Meat is not actually the centerpiece of your meal. Those aren't lessons that, like, I think our culture
Right.
teaches intentionally.
Right.
And so when we're eating like some foods, when we're fasting,
Mhm.
there's almost this feeling of like, this isn't adequate. You know, like, I know our culture, we kind of hate having people come over during Tzom because it's like, oh my God, like you're coming over and all I have to give you
What
is
am I
this.
going to serve? Right.
What am
Is vegetables. Right.
And even when someone comes over that you know isn't fasting, people go almost out of
the dread. Forget it. The dread.
Yeah, they go almost out of their way to serve them because they're like, oh my God, like, I don't have anything real to serve you. But in reality, the food that we eat when we're fasting has way more variety. It has way more nutritional value. It has way more color to it. It's actually prettier to even look at. But it's just not culture. It doesn't seem like I provide you with anything of substance sometimes if I'm providing just some food. But in reality, we're probably at our healthiest while we're fasting. But again, that's not necessarily the narrative that we've been taught.
Right. Miraf?
I agree 100% with Heran. I didn't grow up fasting, but I did start doing it when I was older, to feel closer to my mom and just for religious reasons. But I felt like when I was growing up and I was watching, my cousins and my aunts do it, that it was this like really difficult and restrictive kind of way of going about life for this span of time, and I felt bad for them. I remember how stressed my mom would get, like, oh my gosh, I have to make these other dishes, and she would make them, and then I'd be like, well, I'm looking at them like, well, they just looks like more food to me, like
right,
I didn't really think that it wasn't, fulfilling, but that's because I also have this Americanized side. So my mom's Habesha, she's from Ethiopia, but my dad is from Mississippi. So, that's that country.
Oh, Southern cooking and everything. Yeah.
So, I kind of grew up like kind of a little bit torn between like understanding exactly what fasting was. Like, was it this real like huge sacrifice during this time, or was it like we're just making sure we're eating our vegetables? Because that's what it looked like to me. So I agree, and I think that I saw that it was so beneficial. As a dietitian, I saw how beneficial it was and how it made me rethink my plate in a sense. So I adopted it for multiple reasons, including that it would be more nutrient dense for me during these 55 days of Tzom. So yeah, I agree, Eran.
And I'm gonna talk a little bit. I want to focus a little bit about fasting, Tzom, and even mentally how we have to kind of do a mental shift when that happens. But Mirat, if you can give us a little bit of your idea, I mean, your thoughts on this as well, on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to fasting, I actually didn't grow up fasting that much. I remember like we didn't have to fast all the time, just the last week. This was mandatory at home. And when I got older, actually, I kind of didn't do it anymore. And then I had to go back actually to Ethiopia to start doing it. So it kind of changed also. I mean, I had no choice. So this was also very good. I mean, it was not before that I was not eating also that much meat. So it was not really a big deal to me. But
if I change up.
Yeah, but the thing, what it changed is when it comes to fasting is really like the mental response. So I was more focused and I knew what I had to eat, and I was preparing my food for the whole week, especially when I had to go to field or something. So I kind of like actually went to the market, got all like my flax seeds, soup and sell it and everything. So And it's so healthy. It's really like the food is so healthy. Yeah, you have so much grain. You have good grains. No, I mean, you have a lot of good fats, like especially with all this sesame and stuff and all kind of salads. So after 2 or 3 weeks, I really changed. I mean, I was really like, I felt good. And then there are also some endorphins, which kicks in after a while, after you like, it's not just like, it's not just the food actually, which kicks in, it's also like combination. So I kind of, I don't know. And actually, I didn't miss anything.
So, Meherat, you're going in and out. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry.
You know what? I'm really thankful that you're here. So I'm not going to blame you. I'm kidding. I know we go in and out, but I do understand. No, but it's because of the distance maybe, or the connection is a little bad, it goes in and out. But I think what I heard you saying is that you didn't feel like one of the things that you mentioned is that you are preparing your food, and that because you also already didn't eat meat that much, the adjustment to going back to fasting, it didn't impact you as much. But also one of the things that I kind of like, what I believe I heard was, because you were in Ethiopia, you kind of didn't have a choice. You were just, because culturally everything changes, right, when we're back home. So, that is a great leadway into what happens during the fasting season, or when we decide to, all of the sudden, Heran, you mentioned that, Dr. Heran, you mentioned that we're eating meat, and then we have this huge fast Lent, or so many of the other songs. And there are a lot of, what most people may not know is that almost 2/3 of the year we're fasting. Even out of the 7 main fasting seasons, at least for the Orthodox faith followers, is a lot of fasting that's incorporated as part of our living. So one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is, once we decide, when we mentioned Psalm, there's a mindset shift that we have, and you all mentioned it a little bit, it ties back into when we're not fasting, because we have meat, we have this, what we consider this main dish. Now it's no longer there. So is there a mindset shift that we have? That's what I want to hear from you guys, one. And two, if there is a mindset shift, we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the second part that I wanted to know about, as far as Tzom is concerned, or fasting, or adjusting our palate, is how does that impact our bodies, specifically the gut? And if we can actually start that from Miraf, I would really appreciate that. If you could start us off.
You said how it impacts what specifically?
So when we're fasting, the mindset, our mindset changes, right? Because we are eating meat majority of the time. Even as a cultural, I think as a culture, meat is pushed to the forefront a lot. And then all of a sudden, when we decide that we want to, maybe, even if we decide not to fast, but we just want to be a little bit healthier, we start eating more vegetables. And when we're doing that,
for the gut, right?
For the gut, one is for the gut, and two, is there a mindset shift that we have? Is there something that we completely have to change?
I think that the mindset for Habashas specifically is really interesting when it comes to fasting, because maybe it's partially due to the fact that it's religiously based, or that we can tie it to our family sort of ritual. I have felt that it's more positive in terms of, it's like we gain more sense of pride during this time. So the people who are fasting, like, usually they're very proud that they're fasting, like, oh, I'm fasting right now. It's, and they let, it's almost like our version of everyone telling everyone that they're vegan, like you hear vegans talking like, I'm vegan. So in a Habesha community, it's like, oh, I'm fasting. Right. So I think it's like very positive, which is, as a dietitian, I love that, because when you hear fasting on the other side, on the more westernized idea of fasting and the intermittent fasting, it's this idea of it's not just restriction, but it's like you're kind of almost going through this torturous time for yourself. But as Habeshas, we have a sense of pride, and we take it to, I think we see it like as a more spiritual type of experience as well. So I think in our culture, it's more positively looked at, but it's not necessarily carried out in the best way all the time in terms of our mindset and how we see our plates, our big family plates. But I do think that the mindset is more positive than the normal like Western mindset of fasting.
Okay. And when it comes to the foods that we're eating a lot of, somebody mentioned soup earlier, a lot of grains, a lot of vegetables. So how does that impact our body, specifically our gut? And how's that different from the times when we're not fasting, especially when we're tying it in to what we're normally eating? Hiran, if you can answer that, perhaps.
Yeah. So, I mean, just like without getting too technical, your gut has different, bacteria, parasites, viruses. It just has like it's like a universe of its own. And the kind of things that are able to live in your gut are really influenced by your diet, and they're really influenced by your health. And some people who have healthier gut diets versus those who have more processed or just kind of like limited diets have different gut makeups. And so you find that they just process things very differently. Like for someone who has been a vegetarian or someone who's been a vegan a long time, when they go back to eating meat, or if they go back to eating something processed, you'll often hear them say that like their stomach hurt, or like they really couldn't even eat it. They really couldn't even tolerate it because their guts are just different now, and they can't really tolerate the same things they used to. And the people who just kind of shift their diets quickly and move towards eating just vegetables and just this and just that, they have kind of a hard time initially because it starts feeling like they haven't eaten anything. And it's mostly because their guts haven't really understood how to process that you're not getting meat. You kind of have to make the most out of what you're getting. And so when we're fasting, we're kind of in this place where we're completely changing how our guts are made up. We're completely changing the kind of organisms that are in our guts. And we fast for so long. In a lot of the fast, we fast for so long that we just kind of create a new environment. And it's awesome, honestly. But then the thing is, we kind of shift back to eating meat so quickly, or when we say like finish our fasts, it's like a bomb drops. Like when for Fasika, when Fasika finishes, it's literally like all meat, nothing but meat.
Jump in, right?
Just jump in. There's no like casual way to start eating meat again.
Right.
And if you are kind of like someone who doesn't
at midnight, like eat, as soon as the kadasi is done. Right.
The minute it's over. So if you're someone who really doesn't even like meat like that, and you're just kind of like, no, I'm good. Is there any like, gourmet or something? They'll be like, girl, like, come on. Like,
right.
That's
55 days. Right. Exactly. Right.
And so like, just kind of like, it's not that our idea of fasting is restrictive. It's just that we're doing it for a purpose. And the purpose is so focused on religion and focused on prayer and connecting with God that you kind of forget that this was good for you. Like this was good for your body. You really don't need to dump all that meat back into your system all at once. But it's also hard to kind of like push that narrative at the same time, because you have to understand that some of these ideas with like eating meat heavy diets are also kind of tied to, socioeconomic things as well. Like not having meat when you're ready to break fast kind of implies you couldn't afford it. So having a bountiful, meatful table kind of way back when meant you had and you could provide. And so now, without even knowing it, we're kind of like still kind of, making those, I don't know, those assertions about ourselves and the kind of
We're
things
stuck in that routine, right?
when that's not the case anymore. You know what I mean? Like we can eat vegetables and it mean we still have money. We can eat vegetables and meat and do all that stuff and it
Listen,
not
vegetables are now more
very
expensive than meat, so
exactly.
right.
So it's just the
Right,
gut
right.
is a delicate place, and for us we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then we fast on and off throughout the year. But if it's not a fast day and if it's not a fasting season, then you can expect to, you know, have to ask for vegetables to be incorporated into your meal. And if they are incorporated into the meal, you kind of have to monitor how cooked to death they are almost, you know, if they're overcooked, over steamed, over boiled, over fried, over
Right,
something.
right.
So it's important to remember the nutritional value of having variety in your diet and how that still impacts your digestive health. If you know, go from some where your gut is so used to eating vegetables and those are just kind of like the organisms that are living in your gut right now, and you shift so quickly, you have to understand you might not be regular for a couple of days or things might not be working the way you're used to them working. You know, you might move slow. You just you know, you have to pay attention to your body and see that there are changes that actually happen when you make those kind of adjustments so quickly. Yeah.
Hello? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Hello?
that was end
Yeah.
period.
We were having technical.
Great point.
Okay, you are there. Lord have mercy. Okay, it's going in and out, right? It's not just me. Okay, that's fine.
No,
Zoom is trying to test us today. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Dr. Haram, for that. Mentally, we're stuck. Actually, I wanted to know, Mehret, if you know, I know you worked also in Ethiopia. You mentioned that earlier. If what Dr. Haran mentioned, is it the same thing when, because I know we're on the, you know, we're in the States, so life is obviously, even though we may follow the same culture, life is, it could be a little different from how it is back home. Based on what you've seen in Ethiopia when you were working there, is there a similar change in what people consume?
What do you mean, a change when it comes to food or a change when it comes to fasting, that people are not fasting anymore?
No, so the transition, right, from the going from fasting to not fasting, is there, and I know I grew up here in the States, which is why I'm asking that specific question.
No, it's actually the same. So this transition is really, there's a cut. So after summer is over, you eat meat, and between that, it's really like, I mean, it's the same. Actually, it's so difficult to find something else, like some vegetables or salads, especially if you're not in the city. It's so difficult because people are like, we fasted for so long. Now it's meat time. So
I don't want to see any greens, is what they're saying, basically.
Exactly, basically. And for me, it was really difficult, especially like making this cut. I knew how my body was going to react, like Heran mentioned before, like doing this cut. I mean, you've been fasting for so long, and then you just like tell your body you're going to eat meat, and he's just like over, like what I'm gonna do with all this meat. So he's not used to it. And so for me, I know my stomach start hurting. So I get like stomach ache or something. So I really like, at Fastika especially, what I had is like, I already had in my mind, like what I'm gonna eat, how much meat I'm gonna eat, how much can I actually eat without getting sick. So I had like to plan a strategy how to survive Fasika without really like dying, like have a meat coma. because this is because if you overdo it, it's also really like dangerous. I mean, depending on how healthy, how young you are, or if you, I mean, it can really like affect your health, especially because the gut is like 70 to 80% of our immune system is in the gut. So it's like coordinating our whole health. So you've been treating your body so good during and then you eat just meat. I mean, nothing wrong with meat, but just the amount of meat, like
Right.
and amount of time you fill your body with it is
A dumping ground. Right. Right.
exactly. It's like, okay.
So, I mean, how do we change that behavior, right? Can we change the behavior? I know I have a young son that I don't want to pass that type of, way of thinking to my son. And I know there are a lot of mothers that want to do a better job. And we are creatures of habit. So is there a way for us to change that behavior?
Yes, so I guess
Yes, please, yes.
since I was working with kids a lot for a couple of years,
That's right.
and
That's right.
all ages, and it was difficult. I would go and say like, "Hey guys, do you know where green beans come from?" And this little boy was like, "The kitchen," and I was like, "Well, you're not." I was like, "He's not.
You're not wrong, right?
Like,
Right.
you know, like, let's explain this fully." So I think like the first step, number one, is bringing the children in the kitchen. I know sometimes like Habesha, like there's a lot going on in the kitchen, and unless they're, I don't know, folding the injera, like that's really kind of the extent that they're helping. So so I
Right.
think it's a good time to like bring them in and kind of talk to them about the lentils, talk to them about stuff, and so that they really understand kind of from the garden to the kitchen how things are brought to the table, and they stop seeing the vegetables as being like the yucky stuff and the meat as the good stuff. It's like it's all food, it's all nourishment.
Right. Right.
And then mothers, we also have to, or they, not yet, but they also have to remember that it takes almost 15 to 20 tries for a child to accept a new food. So, if you try like a couple of times, like, oh my God, my child does not like carrots, like you really do have to give multiple exposures over and over and over again for them to one, become acquainted with it, then be open to trying it and then tasting it. And then even after tasting it, because there is a lot of foods that they'll taste first and not like initially, but then later on their body will crave it and they will want it and they'll ask for it. But if they don't know what a carrot is, how can they know to ask for it? So I think it's really important to just remember the sheer amount of times you have to introduce these foods to kids for them to start to accept it. And then the other opportunity for improvement, I think, for our culture is that we don't really have vegetables at breakfast. Like breakfast is bula, it's malawa, or it's just shy.
I was gonna say, is it supposed to be? Right? Is there supposed to be? We need to talk
diet,
about.
it's like we're putting bell peppers and mushroom. We're having omelets, for the Western diet. But in Habesha culture, we don't really have a place. We're taking out a whole meal that usually, in other cultures has the opportunity to have vegetables. We don't consider any type of lentil or anything for breakfast. So I think if we start seeing breakfast as another opportunity to introduce vegetables, not only to our kids, but for ourselves, that could be a game changer for changing, vitamin deficiencies in the mothers and helping with our gut health and long term. So I think focusing at breakfast is a great idea, and also being aware of just the amount of introductions that you have to give kids when it comes to vegetables and new foods in general.
Thank you. Can we change?
Yeah.
Is it possible for us as adults to change, and what can we do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love talking to an adult who's experienced a change in their like taste perception or them craving something, because they have this overwhelming sense of like, I can't believe I did it. I've talked to multiple nurses, just nurses, like they usually have to eat something very fast or quick and something from the vending machine sometimes. So like I've had nurses who like soda, like they'll drink sodas and or some type of Red Bull or Monster, and they're always like fueling themselves off these liquids. And slowly but surely, they'll switch like one of the sodas out for like a mineral water or something like that. They'll just do once. Maybe they drink 3 or 4 per day, and they'll just switch out one. And so there's a transition period where like it's kind of tough, but they start going a little bit less Coke, more of either water or like a mineral water, some type of seltzer drink. And then they get to the point where like the Coke or soda is just too sweet, because what they've done is they've taught their taste buds that this is not what I'm craving anymore. It does take time. I would say like on average, it's 2 weeks of consistency every day. So it does happen, but on the other end of that, they're always like in awe of themselves. They're like, oh my God, like I don't even want that anymore. Like they're amazed at themselves, because when we get older, we get into this idea of like, well, this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I want. And we stick in that vicious cycle until someone like a Heran or Maharat or Maraf comes by and like, you can do it. Like science says you can do it. It's just about retraining your brain, retraining your taste buds. And that's really all it takes. And they get to the other side and they're like, oh my God, how did I get here? I didn't know I could be here. So yeah, definitely possible.
Yeah, I think just to kind of like piggyback off of what Maraf said, the funny thing is for our people, we go from such extremes, like from fasting to not fasting, and we're very capable of change, as we show ourselves literally in 1 week. But if you kind of like do it without the pretense of this is a cultural norm or this is for a religious practice that they hold in a high esteem, then change is just kind of like, no, this is just who I am. This is what I eat. I don't like these things and I don't want to eat these things. And it's very funny because you can see how much discipline it takes for someone to be a strict vegan for as long as we are strict vegans. But then when it comes down to like, I mean, just try it. Like just try this. Like I know you've never had it, but like let's shake it up. Let's just put this in your meal. And it's just kind of like a fight sometimes, but you have to understand that these are long established patterns that you've had and long established mindsets you've had since you were probably a kid. And to kind of change in one sitting is a lot. So just like you have to be patient with kids when you're introducing food, you also have to be patient with self. It's not realistic to expect that you're going to change in one meal or in one attempt, but it's also not realistic to think you're setting your ways and you're never going to change. The older we get, the less variability we tend to have in the kind of like extreme diets we can have. And so you're kind of relegated to thinking you can only have certain things when you get older. But there's a lot of variety in the world that we just kind of don't open ourselves up to. And if you just maybe, incorporate one thing every couple of months, just like maybe the same way you introduce foods sequentially to babies, you can just kind of try introducing new things to your diet. And eventually you realize you've substituted out the things that you never imagined you wouldn't go without for things that, were at one point probably never in your mindset as part of like a regular diet. And then and it also kind of goes to say the same way Miraf said, you have to like teach kids from like the garden to the table what food is. You have to be a little more patient with kids and kind of like teach them how to do things themselves. When I was little, my mom would let me like help her in the kitchen, and like I don't know if this was intentional and if she was trying to teach me nutritional health, but I did learn from it. But she would like let me, pick through the lentils because, back then lentils would kind of be dirty, so you have to pick through them. Or she'd let me like peel onions for her or peel garlic for her, or just kind of do certain things just so I understood that there was so many different ingredients that went into food, or there were just so many different components, and that there was so much color in the food that I was eating. And, you know, sometimes a kid just doesn't enter the kitchen until it's their turn to be the person that cooks in the house. And if you have that opportunity
Where are they
early,
gonna get that skill from? Right.
exactly. If you have the opportunity earlier in life, then maybe you won't get to somewhere like college, or get to a point where you've moved out of the house and you're just kind of like, well, I have to make something quick, so let me go make some ramen, or let me go order something, or let me go pick up something.
I was going to say,
yeah,
that's
no,
literally what's going to happen.
it's like, it's terrible.
Right,
It's not a good habit to have, but you also have to, you have to understand that sometimes we may not be the most patient of with our kids, and maybe we should be, because eventually when they go out on their own, they have to know how to shop. They have to know how to pick out, you know, good produce. They have to know what a bad, like a rotten fruit looks like, and how, you know, fruit that's going to be ripe looks. They need to know these things for themselves, and maybe allowing them in, and not kind of like associating that with gender roles, and just being like, you need to know, like, you're going to leave here and you need to know. You need to know how to boil some water. You need to know how to do more than just put salt in your eggs. You need to know how to do more than just, you know, eat pasta. And if you're eating pasta, you need to know that it's like your options are not just red sauce. And in some instances, when our parents get sick, or if our parents become less capable of taking care of themselves, and we kind of take on this role of caretaker, who then would we ask? You know, so like, you kind of have to train them up early, so that you know, even the learning, even if your parents don't teach you exactly what you're supposed to be doing, that habit of wanting to learn, and that habit of feeling like there's space here for me to figure out how to do this, that starts early in life.
And I think, and I'm going to say quickly, my mother used to say, come over here, come in the kitchen and watch me cook. You're not going to embarrass me. And I know she said it as a joke, but I'm so thankful for that now, because like you said, Heron, I have an appreciation for the different types of food, and seeing different colors means it's a good thing. There's more balance in what I'm eating, right? So Meredith, if you can give us, I mean, and maybe all three of you guys can kind of give us some suggestions on how we can break these habits that we've had. Because like you said, all of these things are tied back to our culture as well. And I know there were certain things that were mentioned, such as, you know, take it easy, don't beat yourself up. You're not going to be able to go 0 to 100. So, you know, kind of doing things little by little. Are there any other suggestions that people can start kind of implementing if we wanted to, because 2 weeks away from the big Lent passing? So can you give us some suggestion on how to easily continue to be healthy as the fasting season ends?
Yeah, I will, but first I would just like to add something up, especially when it comes to children and early behavior change when it comes to nutrition, which is really so important. I mean, I also used to work with kids, but I also have 2 kids of my own. And I have been like, now they're teenager older, but I have been like so many different stages with them. And what I always did was like, even when they were really like very small, so they were always with me in the kitchen, and food was part of their life. So they used to cut, and they never was really like endurance or something. They just like, they used to cut just some vegetables and left after 5 minutes, but for them it was like, okay, well, yeah, I did that. So they were really like proud of what they did, so it was easier for them to put them on the table, and they ate actually their food. And then that times when they didn't help, they were like really complaining about the food. So this is like what actually, how important including your own children during cooking is, not to keep them the whole time, but just to keep them interested, and just also like to give them a food of their choice. Like we had 1 or 2 fruits or vegetables they didn't have to eat, but the rest they had to try, because one reason they had to try was like not eat it, but try, because their brain was still developing. So if you, especially at the child, if you don't give your children as many different tastes a couple times more, it will not develop. So there's also one part of behavior change, which really starts at early childhood. Actually, it starts when you're pregnant and when you breastfeed your baby. So this was part of what I also wanted to add, especially from experience. I mean, it's not always difficult. It's not always easy, especially with children, because they kind of change, especially when they get a teenager. But when it comes to the fasting season, when we want to change, what I also like experience is like the elderly actually are realizing, especially in Ethiopia, realizing how healthy some food is. So there is a change there, and they are really like mostly eating healthy foods, mostly like vegetables. They don't even eat that much meat anymore. This is what I also recognize. So the problem we have is they're not the elderly, actually it's our age, especially the men. Who are actually focused on meat. So with them to communicate, to change, it's kind of difficult. I mean, is it just us, or is it also is the same with the Western world? Actually, the same. Like there are certain type of ages, gender related eating habits, which are really difficult to change. But when it comes to, I mean, we have to approach it differently. I don't know, like with some people, it works when you just tell them you will gain more muscle, you will get more, you will get faster. So this might be an approach. So it depends on which person you have in front of you to actually to approach him with a strategy. But I mean, to add to change doesn't actually come from one day. It takes a while, as Merav also said. It's just something really, we need to be patient, also patient with ourselves, and we cannot expect to change in 2 or 3 weeks, especially when it comes to food habits, because this habit's been there for a while. And it will also like, just take it day by day, step by step, just change one habit for a month, maybe reduce your sugar in your tea for 1 spoon, and then next month you just don't drink it without. And then what's the next habit you also want to change? So just this is my suggestions always, just start with one habit you want to change, and then add one after one, and that way it wouldn't seem like you are actually sacrificing something. You're not really realizing it. So, and it's also way easier for you. It's like a project. I mean, you have a goal, you need to create your steps, how you want to get there. You're not going to get there in 2 weeks. So do a long-term goal, and you don't get stressed, and it's way easier for you.
So you won't beat yourself up if you're taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. The point is that the end goal is what matters, is what you're advising.
Exactly. The end goal is what matters. And really, we have to be fair to ourselves. I mean, we are already surrounded by so much stress, our work stress, we have children, and our daily life are not always the same. So they change also. So if you are so strict to yourself and then you beat up yourself because you didn't like actually change as you wanted, it will put more pressure on you. And then you will just, I mean, the chances that you will just quit are way bigger than if you just be very nice to yourself and really like go like, I mean, a mile, I mean, what you call like 1,000, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with 1 step, right?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Merav, Dr. Abi, is there anything, Dr. Hernandez, is there anything that you guys want to add as far as giving us certain suggestions or certain steps that we can take if, let's say, there is a habit that I'm trying to break as far as eating it is concerned?
Yeah. So first off, your mindset in making those changes are really important, and you need to kind of make sure that you don't have negative kind of like narrative around it. If you're trying to cut out sugar, just little by little, you don't have to go cold turkey. If you're trying to incorporate new foods into your diet, you can, do it slowly. And if you don't succeed at it, you can't talk to yourself as if, you're never going to do it. Like she said, you have to be kind to yourself, and you have to set small, manageable goals until you find that you are at that big goal. But overall, you can't look at the fact that someone else has done it as a measure of the fact that you haven't done it, or compare your progress to someone else's. Your behaviors and the things that you've learned throughout life, you can't really gauge how deep implanted they are into your life until you start trying to change them. And for some people, they just kind of, it just wasn't part of their lives to begin with, or maybe it just wasn't that deep of a habit. And so some people are easier at, like, they have an easier time at incorporating new, healthier habits. So managing your mindset as far as those things are really important, because if you can control your mind as far as these things are concerned, then implementing a schedule, or implementing new ways of thinking about foods, it's a little easier.
Yeah, I agree.
like that,
The
managing your
mindset
mind.
is the mindset is super important when it comes to like changing habits, but we also have to think about like our triggers too. Like, what is it that's triggering me to make this decision? So our brains, our bodies, they're super smart. The a day when you're stressed out and you, I don't know, get off of work, or you deal with whatever situation you're dealing with, and you choose to go have something sweet, like you go buy ice cream and you feel better after eating the ice cream, your brain relates that to ice cream equals happiness. So whenever you're stressed out, you go eat ice cream, and you have a taste for ice cream. So you've created like this, response that happens, this trigger when you're stressed, and you think that you'll be satisfied after eating the ice cream. So sometimes it's about understanding your trigger. If you, like, for me, for example, when I was younger, every time I passed a specific gas station, I would want to get hot Cheetos. So to help me stop triggering like that, oh, I see the gas station, I crave hot Cheetos now, I would not drive past that gas station. I would just like go down a different street. And it actually helps. So by not seeing the place where I would buy it, I made it more difficult for me to act on this habit or what have you. So that's why some of the tools or tips that people give is, if you don't want to eat it, don't make it easy access for yourself. Don't have it in your house. Don't have it in the pantry. And what have you. So it's good to kind of see, like, what is it that triggers me before I want this stuff? Am I stressed out? Am I, going through something? Or, is it easy access? Maybe, having that tray of cookies on the counter is not the smartest idea. Maybe, putting it up, or putting, that you have to like really think about it if you want it. Maybe that's better. Maybe just not purchasing it at all. So sometimes it's about access, and really just thinking about like why that behavior is happening as well. But transitioning out of the I think that the best thing you could really do without being too harsh on yourself is just telling yourself to eat your vegetables first. And take your time when you're eating, because that way you can get fuller on the good stuff first, and you can still have the meat, you can still have your tips, but it's just the last thing that you eat. And if you're already full on, the cook and the injera, then you don't need as much of the meat at the end. So just kind of like switching up your order. It's a very simple thing to do, but it could, be beneficial in the long run of things. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I actually, you mentioned something that I wanted to kind of talk about. And while we were, before we started the show, we were talking a few days ago, and we mentioned about gursha. Okay, from the tradition perspective, I love giving gursha. It's like, it's the way we express love to me. And actually, the bigger it is when we're feeding people, ጉርሻና ፍቅር ሲያጨናንቅ ነው ይባላል. That's actually a saying the bigger it is, the more it's being compared to love. So, when we talk about how does gursha and things that are not planned, how do they impact, our eating habits, or do they impact our eating habits?
It's tough. So this is a love-hate thing for me, Gorsha, because like as a dietitian, like I'm a big proponent for listening and intuitive eating, and listening to your body, knowing when you're full, paying attention to your hunger cues. And when we give Gorsha, especially to kids, it's like, and they're saying they're full, that's like one of the worst things you can do for them in the long run, because you're throwing off their own ability to understand when they're full. So kids, when they push away the tray, they're done, they're full. So that's something that's internal with them that they have. But what happens is then they have the mom, no matter the culture, who's usually saying, if you don't finish everything off your plate, you can't leave the table, or you better finish everything off your plate, or you have to finish this part of your plate. And so it becomes like this, it becomes an experience that's negative at that point, right? It's like, oh, like now I'm being threatened. And so you're taking away from the positive nature of being at the family table when you start requiring for things to be eaten before the child can leave the table. So in addition to that, when we're forcing food into a child's mouth and teaching them that to not accept it is disrespectful and rude, then this social behavior starts, surpassing the body's normal ability for balance. And that's not something it's not something that's very easy to teach again, especially when a child's learning, everything else. And to teach them to like, now you have to listen to your body. It's like, mommy, what do you mean listen to my body? Like that's going to be a hard concept to teach to a child. So once you throw it off, it's going to be a lot of work to reestablish that. And that just becomes intuitive eating, as you get older. But I've struggled with it because, in my profession, I understand that I'm full. I understand the hormones in my blood that are telling my brain that I'm full. Like I have leptin in my blood. My brain is like, we're good. But then, I have my aunt coming, like putting food in my mouth, and it's not only one gursha, okay? It's multiple gursha. It's like just one more, and you think it's just one more, and it's like just like the Drake song, it's only one, but it's actually three or something. It's more.
Right.
So you're just accepting like, okay, I can do one more bite, and it's actually 6 more bites, and that's not fair, right? That you feel like you don't want to be disrespectful, but now you're like hurting full, like now it's like too much. So it's almost like you have to act like you're full before you're full so that you can get the gursha and then be okay.
There's a little bit of gap, right?
Yeah, like leave space for gursha instead of dessert, leave space for the gursha, and that's it. But yeah, I definitely, I love that it means love, because I think that there should be positive emotion around food, but at the same time, I think we have to practice as a people to understand when someone feels, or to let people feel like it's okay to say no and to not accept it, or for them to be able to say like, just like at Fogo de Chao, you flip the piece of paper over to say you're full. Maybe something
green means go, red means stop, right?
Yes, exactly. So no, if it's red, no gursha, please don't have any. No, don't want to have to say it. But yeah,
because the acceptance, the person's almost hurt when you're saying no, but and I think there's something that I really want to kind of go back to, and Dr. Hamid, you guys can all answer this to me. You mentioned something about intuitive eating. Are you saying that our bodies, they give us a signal that says, all right, like this is the full button, you are now here, like be careful, and then it goes a little bit further, and now it's like you're over the full button. So
Yeah.
should we, is there something like that? And should we be eating when it tells us, you know, you're hungry versus waiting for a specific time to eat?
So that's kind of like there's so many answers to that, but let me gather my thoughts. Okay, so when you're
Right.
eating, the positive part of our culture is that eating is a social experience. So when you're eating in like as a family, or when you're eating out of one gabata, the thing is like you're talking too. You're not just eating. So you eat slower, and so it's you're able to actually eat and then allow the signal from your stomach to your brain travel back to you to allow you to understand we've had enough. When you eat alone, or when you kind of like are, you know, kind of relegated to eating very separately, you eat quicker, and so you kind of miss that point. You're still eating while the signal is traveling and still trying to be, you know, digested by your brain. And so like we have that added benefit of eating as a community and eating as a family, but we also need to be able to pay attention to those cues when we're alone. And we need to understand the value of like eating and savoring your bites, and like actually mechanically chewing and actually, you know, slowing down while you eat, so that those signals have time to process. And so you can also start to understand, I've had enough. Or when you're starting to take food out onto your plate, you know what portion sizes make sense for you and how much you eat to begin with. But sometimes when you're eating with family, or when you're invited over somewhere, you're not actually even in control over how much food is on your plate, because you're like, I'm good with this. This is good. This is my portion. And they're like, no, 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 no. You have to try this. You have to try this. And then there's like, there's always this thing with like, for mashiyat abak shno, and you're just kind of like, I mean, kind of like, can I, like, yeah, like, it's like, it's not a bad thing for me to want to eat this.
Can I eat? Then I just breathe a little bit,
yeah,
right?
It's fine. I usually find myself like lying when I go to family members' houses, because I'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna come back for seconds, and I'm not. But I you know, I kind of have to like, I want to give the most complimentary.
Run out the back door.
Yeah, like I want to be as complimentary as I can, and I want to show that I'm enjoying what has been presented to me, because I mean, we've all seen our moms cooked. It's not easy. Like, this is not, you know, a dish that took 2 minutes to make. These are all hard dishes to make. And so I don't want you to feel like you didn't do enough. And I don't want you to feel like, you know, maybe you should have prepared something different. But at the same time, if say it's like Easter, or say it's like Christmas or something, I could have just came from somewhere else, and I could have eaten there too.
Right.
And coming here and saying I don't want to eat is offensive. So like you just kind of like have to understand where those boundaries are. And we really don't have boundaries in our culture when it comes to eating. So when someone says they've had enough, or when someone says they don't want second portions on their plate, we kind of have to find a way to control that cultural, you know, like thing that makes the person who's hosting get up and still get a chilfa full of food and put it on your plate still. And that's not me being offensive, but it's also, you know, how do you do that? How do you do that with these ingrained habits and cultures that predate us and our, honestly, we might sound kind of hippy dippy to some of these people, because, you know, being a nutritionist is the same as it's a really new science for some people. And so for us to kind of come in and be like, talking about these social norms that predate us and predate our families, it's a lot, but it makes sense.
Right.
It makes sense, you know, like if I'm full, that's a universal feeling. You understand what full is, you feel it too. I don't know why we have to fight about this. Like, I don't want to prove it to you, you know, so just trust people when they tell you they're full.
But you did not eat. I don't feel like you're, based on what you're eating, I don't feel like you're full, right?
Exactly. You know, and like we kind of have to take the social value of eating without making it something else, you know, like let us enjoy the fact that we eat with one another, that we are breaking bread with one another is valuable. But don't add something extra to it. If I say I'm full, I can still be here with you, conversing. I can still be here with you, enjoying your company. I don't have to necessarily be eating, or I don't necessarily have to have the portion that seems like, I'm over indulging to feel like I can be part of this social experience. I know that sometimes if we get up before everybody's done eating, or if I say I'm full before everybody's done eating, then I've ruined the mood, kind of. And it's like, sometimes I've developed the habit of still staying at the table after I'm done eating, just to still be in interaction, so nobody feels like anything has been ruined as far as like the social experience is concerned.
Right.
But then, as Maraf said, the gusha starts coming if they see that you haven't been eating. So we have to understand to trust people when they say, I'm full. That was a period.
Okay. I would like to add something. I mean, we almost said everything actually about how we can control our appetite, or if there are any ways. So what is also really like, we forget about eating habits. I mean, I like gusha. I don't like too much gusha, just to say that, to mention it. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm fine with it. Let's say it that way. But I don't also like the forced button. But
I enjoy it too, so I don't feel bad.
Okay, I'm glad I found someone. But to go back a little bit from gusha is like what Boss actually mentioned was about our hunger. I mean, it's let's not forget that our hunger is actually regulated by different factors. One which we didn't mention, I mean, besides the habits and trigger and everything, is also the hormones and sleep. So if we are stressed and we don't sleep enough. So our hormones, which are actually responsible to regulate it, they just get out of control, and we miss. So we don't have enough of these hormones, which are actually responsible to say, okay, hey, you had enough food now, so just stop. I mean, like it takes a while until it goes from the guts to the brain. So not getting enough sleep is also one way. I mean, you can read it, which makes difficult for you to actually change your habit, even if you want to. So getting enough sleep is also really important. This one factor. And also stress. The stress, depending on what kind of stress you have, like, I mean, there's good stress, but there's also bad stress. If you have that bad stress, it's also like responsible for your hunger, and also the hormones which are regulating your behavior and your eating behavior. So I mean, these two things shouldn't be really like left aside. For me, I think they are really like actually one of the most important, besides the to also to listen to your body. But if I am stressed, especially now, I mean, it's the whole shutdown is
Yes,
just,
I want to talk about that.
exactly. I mean, it changed my, I mean, we are really trying to eat healthy, and we are cooking a lot, which is also good because we are just at home most of the times. But it just affects also I crave for some comfort food more than actually like 2 weeks ago. I mean, the last 2 weeks I could really handle it very well, but now this is like it's a timeline, which is really like everything is just been here for 3 weeks, and it's affecting my mood and also my hormones. I'm stressed, I'm not sleeping well, so it's also affecting my behavior right now. So this is
And actually, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, this is not our norm. I don't know if this is going to be part of the new norm going forward, but I just wanted to understand during this time when we're experiencing a lot of stress, when we're experiencing a lot of unknown, we're not sleeping, like you said, Mehret, how does that impact our eating habits? Are those hormones or are our moods impacted by why we're eating? And if so, how can we adjust them? And obviously, there's a lot that that can be stressful right now. Is there anything that we can't eat to kind of calm ourselves down? For example, I think you guys mentioned sugar earlier.
I mean, sorry.
So, no, go ahead, Mohammed.
I'll just make it very short. I mean, actually, there is no special diet during this time. Actually, now the same recommendation we make actually also applies to know which. But what I really like recommend is like for what I'm doing for myself is really like I'm strict about my diet right now, because there are actually like whole grain. I'm really like very focused on whole grain because they also have like this, they regulate my gut bacteria, which are also responsible for my immune system. So that way I'm doing something for my health actually. And the other thing is like we drink a lot of water or different teas, and we try to include as much vegetables as possible, but also fruits. So we are really like actually pampering, treating ourselves as good as possible with food. I mean, but also trying to focus on healthy food, so which are actually also improving our health, enhancing our mood sometimes. And I mean, there are days where you cannot control it, and yeah, then I guess we have to accept it then. But mostly it's really important what we eat actually, because it affects how healthy we are, and actually how we're going to feel.
Yeah, I agree. It like our food does impact how we feel, and it's not just for the day. Research does support that when we eat fruits and vegetables on one day, that it does impact our mood positively up until the next day. So you're not just eating for yourself today, you're also, when you eat healthy today, you're also eating healthy for your mood for tomorrow. And when it comes to how the stress of all of this is impacting our bodies, it's just really about our bodies being less selective. So we know it's like that our gut becomes more permeable, right? That means we're allowing for we're less selective about what our body is absorbing, and that's what the stress hormones will do. Once it's in our system, then our body, if you think of it like, the front of a club, it's like everybody gets to get in, right? So that's the free radicals in addition to, the vitamins and minerals that we need. So it's whenever people say like, oh, I gained so much weight when I was stressed out about this, it's like, so I ate this way, that's why I gained the weight. And it's like, well, no, you gained the weight because you ate that way, plus you were stressed. So not only were you eating, this empty calories or what have you, something that wasn't really nutrient dense, not only were you doing that, but your body was responding to your stress and just allowing all of that to be absorbed even more so. So it's like kind of like this perfect storm that you're creating by being stressed and eating unhealthily in a sense. So if there's any tip that we would give for, our community and everyone else right now, is to try to practice being aware of your hunger and your hunger cues. So when you're like sitting and you're working at home and you're like, you know what, I can have a snack, then really delve into that food decision you're about to make. It's like, are you hungry, or are you actually thirsty and you would be fine with some water? Or do you really want those cookies, or are you eating the cookies because they're right there, but if you had a bowl of apples, you would eat the apple? Like diving into those food decisions and changing little things here and there, so that you're more aware. Or maybe you just are working on a task that you don't want to work on, and now you need a distraction, and the distraction is food. So maybe you need to think about whether or not you need to stay focused on that task versus just snacking on something else. So I think one of the best things we can do is just like really pay attention to what we're doing. The whole world's on pause right now, and we can kind of do that with our decision making skills, whether it comes to relationships or food or family and friends. Like, take a look at our own decisions that we're making daily and kind of ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Why am I making this food decision right now? What's really triggering me to do this? And I think the more we do that, the more positive our food philosophies can become, and the more positive our relationships with food can actually be.
I would add to that actually. So right now, I imagine a lot of people are doing a lot of emotional eating. And right now is a time where people are probably even binge eating. And there isn't a lot of, I would say, people don't put a lot of weight behind the fact that binge eating and emotional overeating are actual psychological phenomenon that affect a lot of people and are hard to manage because they're not based on hunger cues at all. If you're experiencing stress, if you're experiencing, any feelings of anxiety, depression, anything like that, those emotions overwhelm your cues. They overwhelm whether or not you're regulating the fact that you're eating because you're hungry versus the fact that you have this overwhelming desire to not think about or not really dwell on what it is that's bothering you. And sometimes people eat because when you're eating, you don't have to think about what you're going through. You have an active task, and your task is eating, or your active task is cooking. Your active task is doing something. And when you get to the end of eating, or when you get to the end of actually like mechanically doing something, then you're back to not having something to distract you. And so that's difficult. That's a very difficult thing for people to be going through, especially right now when everything's on pause. There are no distractions. You either have to be at home working, or you're at home not doing anything. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people kind of like aren't sure where this whole situation leaves them. So this is a really like pivotal time for a lot of people in trying to manage their habits. So it's really important for you to understand your coping mechanisms. If you're eating and you're not hungry, but you're still eating, you kind of can identify that this is not a hunger cue that's causing you to eat. This might be one of your coping mechanisms. And this could be a good time to start identifying healthier coping mechanisms. You could find different mechanical things to do to distract you from what it is that you don't want to think about, if you can't really delve into dealing with what it is that you're really thinking about. People don't believe in therapy. People do believe in therapy. If you believe in it, that's a great way to cope. If you don't believe in it, I would say then find a different coping mechanism that isn't quite as detrimental, because people jokingly post about the fact that they've eaten everything in their fridge already. And it's cool to joke, but then like collectively we start normalizing that kind of behavior. And then you kind of think it's cool for me to have had 3 breakfasts and it's noon, but like it's not, because how much of these healthy habits are you really putting into habit and into rotation when it matters, versus just saying you're going to do it. So these are actual times where you can put into practice things that you find to be difficult, because where are you going to go? What do you have to do? You don't have anything to do. You're not actually that hungry because you're not moving around that much. Let's be honest. Like, we're not going anywhere. So we really aren't like the hungriest we've ever been in our moments right now. So, you can re-examine your relationship with your emotions and food right now, and decide if these are relationships you want to continue, or if you want to change them.
Right. And I think, I jokingly agree that if people don't believe in therapy, they should start believing in therapy. I know that, everything is not what it seems. That's what I'm learning through our conversation now. What I'm realizing is everything is not what it may seem. There are obviously people who are like you guys, who are professionals in this, can kind of see and determine, let me ask, is this really why you're doing it? And we don't necessarily get to do that in our regular life because we're just living it. We may not understand, what's behind the activity or the reasoning why we're doing these things. Another thing that I do appreciate is what we're posting, even as a joke, just because that implements or that creates the new reality for us. And we kind of start subconsciously accepting that as a norm, right? Eating, instead of eating small portions, for example, I've eaten everything, things like that. I know we're saying it as a joke, like you said, Dr. Haran, but I know how much of an impact they have on our lives. And long term, those can actually have a negative impact on us as well. So I'm really glad that you highlighted that. I appreciate it. Thank you. So is there, I mean, we're kind of coming up to the end of our conversation, but if there's anything that you wanted to add, and if you could tell people where they can find you, that would be great. If you want to start, Mehret, since we started with you earlier.
Yeah, you can find me actually on Instagram under my name, Mehret Haile. And I used not to post that much because I was kind of too busy with work and everything. But since the whole situation, I mean, I still have to work, but I kind of have like the feeling I want to talk more about nutrition and post. So you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter under my name. And I would like to say thank you. It was really, I mean, I really enjoyed the whole conversation, also like meeting you here virtually, and also like thank you, Bethlehem, for your efforts and everything. And what I would like to give as a last word is don't estimate your mood when it comes also to vitamin D and the sunlight. Is if you don't have a balcony, and if you are able to walk, to walk, and you're not one of the risk persons who have to stay at home, go outside or get vitamin D. I mean, somehow, because it also affects our mood, but also like our whole. There are so many other hormones which are based on vitamin D, on pre-vitamin D. So that's one thing I would also I forgot to mention, which is also really important, especially when we have to stay at home. We don't get to see the sun too much. So, but if you have a balcony, then that's fine. Just go out there and get your vitamin D.
Thank you. And for those of us who have to stay at home, open the window, find a corner where the sun happens to crack in. I know for a fact, even when my vitamin D was low, I lost a lot of my hair, especially after postpartum. So I understand really the impact of having very little vitamin D. So thank you so much for adding that. And thank you. It was a pleasure really talking to you. Miraf, if you can give us your last thoughts and tell people where they can find you as well.
So whenever people ask me, like, what is something I can incorporate into my lifestyle that you would, suggest for anybody, I always say turmeric. Like, if you don't have turmeric every day, that's something you should be doing. So like a teaspoon of turmeric with like some black pepper, because the pepper allows for your body to absorb the turmeric better. So that's something that I tell everyone. But you can find me on Instagram at oneinamelon.co. I'm also online at www.oneinamelon.co. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And Dr. Haran, if you have any last words and where they can, or where people can find you as well.
Yeah. So I think it's also important, just to drink as much water. Well, not as much, but drink water. Be conscious of the fact that you should be drinking more water in these times, especially just to kind of make sure that you're hydrated, just to make sure that you stay up with how things are going. You want to make sure that your body is replenished more often than we would be if we're moving around, so that these habits become more part of your life when you do go back to regular life. I know that normally people may drink like one bottle of water like this and be like, well, I did it, but it's you need more. So
Right.
you know, try to be active in drinking more water. I drink a lot of tea, so if you want to drink tea too, that would be a great way to get your hydration. But staying hydrated is a really good way to just kind of make sure that your body gets some of what it needs. You know, we have to remember we're made mostly of water, and to dehydrate yourself also means to concentrate toxins. So to be active in flushing out toxins and to kind of like lessen the concentration of, you know, just the bad things in your body, you want to flush it out as often as you can. As far as finding me is concerned, you can find me on Instagram, saint.heran. And eventually I'm sure you'll find me in different forms once I set my life up a little more, once all this stops. But thank you for having us.
Absolutely. We look forward to your progress. Thank you so much, ladies, for really coming and kind of shedding a light on a lot of the things that we are doing. I know I took a lot from our conversation, and I'm hoping that our viewers did as well. There are a lot of things that we may be doing that we've associated as part of our culture. But I think seeing and talking to people like such as yourselves who understand both sides, the cultural aspect and the benefits behind what understanding what we're doing and why we're doing them, it really helps us, I think, kind of change, be able to make the changes that are necessary where we keep the good and kind of adjust the things that are not working, because culture is adjustable. So thank you again for being on the show, and those that followed and that will be seeing this, thank you so very much. We will be putting the contact information for our guests today, and I hope you are going to be drinking a lot of water. I know I am. I'm already done with one bottle, so I need to go back for more. Thank you again, and have a good night.